It's time once again for another edition of Talk to Me. And now, here's Emmy himself, 8-time Emmy Award-winning journalist, Maynard Eaton.
Hello again, everybody. I'm Maynard Eaton, and welcome to this week's edition of Talk to Me, a weekly conversation with cultural, political, business leaders. And we have a man with us tonight who's dealing with a central part of the Black business economy. His name is Cornelius Blanding, the president of the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. Cornelius, thank you for joining us.
Maynard, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Tell us what that is. That's a big-sounding name, Federation of Southern Cooperatives. But as I understand it, basically you're dealing with the health and survival of Black farmers, right?
Yeah, definitely. So our organization is the Federation of Southern Cooperatives Land Assistance Fund. And all the Federation is simply is a cooperative association of Black farmers, landowners, and cooperatives all around the South. The Federation was founded out of the Civil Rights Movement back in 1967. It was founded by 22 cooperatives. And these are folks who own their businesses in their communities before, during, and after the Civil Rights Movement. They heard about each other. They started coming together actually back in 1966, talking about the idea of cooperating together to continue their cooperative movement in the South. And in 1967, it led to them creating the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. So we are a federation of all those co-ops all throughout the South, owned by Black farmers and residents throughout those communities.
Cornelius, I got to smile a little bit. You said it started in 67. That's probably the last summer I went to my grandfather's farm. I was there every summer from a school kid to my last year in high school. Black farmers in Wadsworth, North Carolina seem to be thriving, many of them. What's the state of Black farmers there and throughout the South now?
Maynard, that's a critical question. That's the question that everybody's talking about these days and trying to figure out. Let me talk about it from the standpoint of some key statistics and statistics that we use. In 2010, there were in 1910 there was 218,000 Black farmers who owned roughly 15 million acres of land. According to the U.S. Census, by 1992. There were only 18,000 Black farmers owning roughly 2 million acres of land. So you're talking about a significant loss of Black farmers, a significant loss of land, equating to almost 1,000 acres a day, almost a 90% loss of Black farmers. So Black farmers have been on a decline for centuries. As of today, according to the latest statistics, the National Ag Statistics Service, there's roughly 40,000 Black farmers. But they count that different than they counted back in 1910 up into 1992. So we're talking about an emergence of the Black farming community with these rural, these urban farmers and others who are gardeners and other things, and equated in total into that number. But still, with that, the state of the Black farmers is in a very precarious situation at this point. And I'll speak about it from the standpoint of the way I refer to it as they deal with the unholy trinity, if you will, discrimination, credit, or the lack of access to credit, and heirs property. This issue that I was talking about with your producers prior to the show. And so Black farmers historically and continue to face discrimination, primarily in their markets of credit, accessing credit, but also in other ways as well, accessing government programs and resources. And some of the folks might be familiar with the Black farmer lawsuit that happened back in 1999. They're referred to as Pickford versus Glickman. And Black farmers at that time won a historical settlement versus USDA when it was shown, admitted to, that USDA discriminated against Black farmers.
And they were going to get millions, right? That was the news. Black farmers were going to get infusion of millions of dollars, bring the farmers back. That was what we were led to believe, as far as I thought. That's changed now.
It was the largest lawsuit in the history of this country, civil rights lawsuit, and it was 2 phases of it, in total, a little over $2 billion, actually. And so what it looked like was that certain Black farmers got $50,000 each around this. Again, there was 2 different tracks. Some had to prove their case, but the majority of them got $50,000. And it may seem like a lot. So $2 billion seems like a lot when you could look at it collectively. But when you start talking about $50,000 for an individual farmer, and based on the damage or the harm that was caused based on the discrimination, which was at the worst case scenario was the loss of land and livelihoods. So $50,000 couldn't adequately compensate for that. But there was this historical settlement, and it was symbolic more than anything else, because for the first time it was shown that Black farmers had been discriminated against by the government, and that it wasn't so-called that Black farmers couldn't farm. They had all these hurdles and all these challenges that they had to overcome that others didn't. But they had to still compete in the agricultural industry, which is one of the most competitive industries in our country.
Right. Cornelius, I'm out here in the Midwest right now. And in fact, I did a story for a local paper about a young lady who was thriving as on the West Coast as a salesperson, living a good life out of college. A farmer here in this local community died all of a sudden. She came back, took over the farm, a female, and is doing better than he was, and better she was doing as a multimillionaire on her own. White farmers seemingly survive well. What's our downfall?
So man, you're absolutely right. And so when you start talking about agriculture, it's the biggest industry in this country and in the world. Everybody has to eat. But Black farmers, as you referenced, are struggling. And again, go back to that unholy trinity I mentioned, the challenges that we've had: discrimination, lack of access to credit, and an insecure form of land tenure, heirs property. And so we suffer. Those are the 3 biggest ills, if you will, and cause the biggest problems. Black farmers can't get access to the credit that they need. And as you know, when you start talking about business, the lifeblood of any business, of most businesses, is credit. And Black farmers haven't had access to equitable credit like others have, for the most part, to run their businesses. And they've had this issue where they had an insecure form of land tenure, particularly called heirs property, which is a huge problem in the Black community.
Cornelius, I may get this wrong, but explain, please, what I understand. You have intervened in that suit somehow to get Black farmers their money. Can you talk about that a bit? Because you play a major role now as well, are you not?
Yeah. Yes. So let me, yes, made it a great question. And so let me bring folks up to speed. So, you had this Black farmer lawsuit back in '99, and you fast forward to the day, the basis of the conversations around this Black farmer lawsuit, where again, was shown that USDA discriminated against Black farmers. But here in recent time, President Biden came out with, he has the Build Back Better Act that is being talked about and being negotiated on now, and the reconciliation bill and all those things. A big part of that was something called the American Rescue Plan. And in that American Rescue Plan, you had 2 sections, Section 1005 and Section 1006, that referred to farmers of color, Black farmers as part of that, Native Americans, Hispanic, Asian Americans, et cetera, et cetera. But Section 1005 is a critical piece in that it was about debt relief. It was about debt relief for these farmers of color, including Black farmers, so that they can start moving toward an equal footing, if you will, to start making their businesses, their farms more viable. But this was passed by Congress. This became the law of the land. And so Black farmers and other farmers of color were supposed to get debt relief, all their debt within USDA and all their guaranteed loans guaranteed by USDA written off. This law was challenged by white farmers. Started in Wisconsin to Ohio, I think, to Florida, and then out to Texas. But it culminated into this kind of class action lawsuit where white farmers said that it was not constitutional, was unconstitutional to give debt relief to farmers of color and not to all. So it's being challenged by white farmers and being held up because of that challenge. We, the Federation, have filed a motion to intervene in this case to say that, hey, Congress was right in passing this law, and USDA should be commended for taking a step forward. USDA and the administration should be commended for taking a step forward to alleviate the debt of farmers of color, and especially Black farmers, based on the historical discrimination and what was shown and proved in 1999 with the Black farmer lawsuit. But again, it's at a stalemate now. So no farmer of color, no black farmers getting this debt relief that was promised, and an act that was passed by Congress.
Is it stalled in the courts? Is it moving through the court system, or is it kind of blocked and meandering around?
Well, meandering around right now. It's a lawsuit that has been filed, and so again, we filed a motion to intervene so that we can answer that question with more clarity. Because many folks, including us, don't know what's going on. But as an intervener in the case, we now become a party, and we can get access to all the information. We can get discovery, and more important, we can bring forth stories of black farmers, of our membership, so that when this case is considered, they're not just deliberating on what they think are just the merits. When you have to look at it in the context and look at the history, and you bring those human stories, those black farming stories to the front, so that now people can make a decision based on that.
So you tell those stories, and show the pain and plight of black farmers, videotape them, put them on. But also, sir, I imagine, I talked to Ms. Ray about this. She thinks it's time to nationalize the plight of black farmers and put it on national TV in urban centers. Is that, you think, the way to go now? Take it out of the South and bring it home to major cities like New York and Baltimore and Atlanta?
Definitely. What we have to understand is the importance of agriculture to our country, but also to this world. And when we do that, it would then become a nationalized plight, and more importantly, an international plight. Because as you know, man, you've been doing this show for decades, and you've interacted with civil rights leaders and others. And one of the key parts of the civil rights movement was that when the world saw the story and the world understood what was going on, it added momentum to that movement. It's no different here, that we as a nation have to get behind this, and the world will soon follow, because our struggle has been a model for not only the nation but the world. But we have to first start seeing agriculture and as what it is, and the importance to our nation is not a zero-sum game. And when we start understanding it as that, we start understanding that all agriculture has to be successful in order for there to be a prosperous economy, in order for there to be a clean environment, in order for there to be a food secure nation. And that's about all of agriculture, large, small, black, white, and all. But black farmers are a key component of that. But when we understand it that way, it becomes a nationalized movement. It becomes an international movement, because we then start understanding the importance of agriculture in general, but black farmers and their role in it specifically.
You talked about the civil rights movement, Cornelius, and everybody remembers the Montgomery bus boycott and other civil rights, Selma, Alabama, and all those kind of things. But isn't this a black-white issue as well? Isn't this abject racism as well?
Definitely. By all means, this is still part of that whole civil rights movement, that civil rights issue. It's a black, white, and every other kind of issue, and we all have to understand it that way. But we have to also see the civil rights components of this, because when we start talking about, when you asked me about the plight of the black farmer, and I mentioned that unholy trinity, and heirs property was one of them. And all that is that an insecure form of land title, where in our community and the research that we've done, approximately 60% of all black-owned land is in heirs property. And that makes it vulnerable, because when a landowner dies, that land is passed down to the heirs. And they usually haven't done a will or some kind of estate plan. That's not common in our community. The land is passed down to these heirs, and so we own it in common. And that's how we've preferred it. But the challenge with that is that when all of us own it in common as heir, it's an undivided interest, and it's vulnerable because it's not a clear title. And in this country, in order to get access to credit, in order to get access to government programs, you have to show a clear title. So now we're behind the 8 ball, if you will. We don't get clear access to those things, and that becomes a civil rights issue. Because as you know, one of the components of civil rights is access to government resources and services. But you have a barrier to those services, to those resources with heirs property. So this is a civil rights issue, but it's an issue that impacts us all, because when a black farmer loses his land, when a black farmer loses his farm, it's not just a farmer going out of business. It's our community losing a piece of this country. And that's important. So it is a civil rights issue, but it's also this country losing a piece of agriculture because it usually doesn't go back into farming. And we're losing more and more of our farms as a country. And the more and more farms we lose, the less we are able to feed ourselves, the less food secure we are as a nation. So it's all connected, and we have to understand it that way and see it that way. And when we do, we all, black, white, Hispanic, Native American, we'll all be fighting for every farmer, and especially the black farmers, because they're the most vulnerable.
You know, it also impacts families. I'm just realizing, listening to you, what happened to my grandfather's farm. My aunt and uncles and parents fought over the property. Ultimately, they lost it because it was not a will. It was passed down to all the 10 kids and the aunts, and it was just a mess, as I understand it. And how do you deal with this mess? Not just families, but all this legal issue. What can you do? What are you trying to do as the president of the Federation of Southern Cooperatives?
Great question, Maynard. So this is personal for me also, because like you, my family lost its land. Talking to your producers of the show, we, the Federation, were commissioned to do a study about 45 years ago. We were commissioned by Congress, and a study that was paid for by the Department of Agriculture to really study the land tenure situation of black folks in the South, throughout the South. And what we found 45 years ago was this issue around heirs property. And it was the first study of its kind. And it showed that 60% of all black-owned land, again, was in insecure form of title, heirs property. And so, again, majority of us are at risk of losing that land. My family land on my mother's side was in Lowndes County, Alabama. My grandfather, my mother's father, had a piece of land that was passed down from his mother. And my mother was one of the 7 kids who owned that land as an heir. But as you know, it's a great migration. Folks started moving. My uncles went to New York. And so as you start, that land gets more and more fractionated as time goes on, people forget about that land and they're not connected to it. And so all it takes is for some unscrupulous attorney or some poacher to go out and find and do some basic research and find out who the heirs are and pick one of them off and buy that piece of that land, that their little share of it. And usually it's pennies on a dollar. And it happens to all of us, happened to me. And when they can force what they call a partition sale because they can't agree, because you can't divide that land up. And we end up losing our land more times not for that reason than anything else. And so now we as an organization, heirs property work is what we've been doing for over 50 years. We did it first as the Emergency Land Fund that merged with the Federation, but it's a big corner of what we do as an organization. We do 3 things: cooperative economic development, in terms of organizing people into cooperatives where we can pool our resources and have businesses that we own and control collectively so that we can own and control our communities and the infrastructure in those communities. But we also deal with heirs property. And again, looking at heirs property and saying, how do we look at those statistics that I talked to you about in 1910, 15 million acres of land, into 1992, only 2 million acres of land. It was forecasted that by 2000 there would be no black-owned land if we continued at that rate. And we wanted to make sure that prophecy didn't come true. So as an organization, we continue to work on that issue and have been working on it for 50 years. And so what we do, we have attorneys on staff, we have a network of attorneys that we work with, and we work with heirs property head on. One of the things we do is we have this National Heirs Property Conference that we have coming up in December, the 1st of December. We target 100 heirs property landowners, educate them about that situation, make sure they understand this in entirety. But more importantly, over the course of 3 days, we connect them to resources and develop a plan moving forward so that over the next year, they can clear up that heirs property and put that land into a trust, a family business, or do something to make sure that the title is clear and the family can pass it down generations to continue generational wealth in our community and maintaining that land. Again, we work with law schools and have law students working on the issue to do that research that some of these unscrupulous lawyers would do so that we can track families down and make sure they know of the situation and they can start clearing that title. We work through other attorneys that we have within our network to provide heirs property services, land retention services, and deal with these estate plans and these wills, to do it at pro bono or at low bono if possible. We try to get funding to support that. And so we work through a network of those. We have partners who work with us funders who provide key funding that make this possible. But we work hand on with landowners to make sure that we clear this heirs property issue up at a minimum of 100 landowners at a time every year.
Cornelius, I'm smiling because you sure are a passionate activist and advocate for this issue. But tell me, you're relatively new to this position as president, are you not?
I am.
It's a new calling for you?
I've been the executive director of the organization for now 6 years, but I've been with the Federation for 24 years. So I've grown up in this organization. I've worked just about every position it has in this organization. I came in doing work around a revolving loan fund. I've done a lot of work out in the field in terms of field operations for the organization. I did a lot of the marketing, but I also did a lot of the international work. What little folks know is that as an organization, our movement is not just in the South, to your question. It's about the South, it's about the region, it's about the nation, but it's also connecting Black farmers all over the world, because our vision is to make sure that there's sustainable rural communities around this world supported by a network of Black farmers, landowners, and their cooperatives. And how do we support each other? Our brother, we've done work in Africa, in various parts of Africa, in Cuba, in Haiti, in everywhere there's a Black farmer. We try to connect and say, look, our struggles are not isolated. We have to make sure that we understand each other and understand our struggles. And most times they look very similar. But how do we work and build those networks and continue to work together? And so I've done a number of things within this organization, had the opportunity to work with a number of people. And I have a number of mentors that were in this organization, some still, some who are no longer here. You mentioned our friend, a mutual friend in Heather. But there's so many folks I've had the opportunity to work with over these years and learn this organization, but more importantly, this struggle and this movement. And over the last 6 years, I've been humbled and blessed to be the executive director and to serve this organization in its membership.
Well, sir, I tell you, having worked with SCLC, all the many civil rights leaders like Reverend C.T. Vivian, among others, and Joe Lowry, and now Charles Steele, you are a new voice, a voice that needs to be heard, because as you said, this is still very much a civil rights, human rights issue, is it not? And a food issue for all of us. Definitely.
And man, I appreciate you more than you know, because it's folks like you who've been out there doing this work and really connecting us and being a voice, because we have to hear each other. And I hope that our voice as an organization is heard. I am one representative of this organization. I'm a servant of it, and I would love to be in the conversations with many others. And we as an organization have been connected to the civil rights movement. Every year we do our annual meeting. We've been blessed to have a number of civil rights leaders throughout the years come and be a part of our event and be honored by the event. So we look forward to continue to staying connected to our roots, which is the civil rights movement. And we hope others see our movement as just that, because it is part of the civil rights movement.
Ladies and gentlemen, Cornelius Blanding, a voice, a leader, a spirit behind the survival, saving of Black farmers. Cornelius, thank you for joining us, man. You certainly can talk, that's for sure.
Thank you, man, and thank you for providing this platform and give me the things to say. And I appreciate you and look forward to working with you in the future, brother.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you next week. Again, round of applause for Cornelius Blanding. We thank you very much. This has been Talk to Me.
Thank you.